Evening, everyone. You're watching Montgomery County Republican Club's Direct Line, and we are hosting tonight the Chesapeake governors, our favorite governors, Governor Allen of Virginia and Governor Ehrlich of Maryland. Our co-hosts tonight are Ryan Nidak, and our special co-host guest is Chris Stock from North Carolina. Welcome. Take it away, guys.
Thanks, Dwight. So we're here with Governor George Allen of Virginia and Governor Bob Ehrlich of Maryland to talk about all the latest news impacting, the United States, the world, and the Republican Party here on behalf of the Montgomery County Republican Club. And I think perhaps the biggest news this week is that it's a new day down to our neighbor in the South in the Commonwealth of Virginia, both in two ways. Virginia Tech has a new football coach, and the state of Virginia has a new governor, Glenn Youngkin. I guess, Governor Allen, you want to start us off? You went to the inauguration. If you want to tell us a little bit about it.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Well, it's great to be with Governor Ehrlich and Chris from North Carolina, and you, Ron, and all the viewers. It was exhilarating. It was great fun. It was a reunion of a lot of people who all worked hard for me and others through the years and in this election year. It felt like the first day of liberation of Virginia from all the halting governance and shutdowns, lockdowns, dictates. And Glenn won on a lot of important issues. There were kitchen table issues, the cost of living. The schools in Virginia were not doing anything other than dumbing down the standards. They were closed. The criminal justice system was looking at criminals rather than victims. So law enforcement, public safety was a big issue, as well as education and high academic standards, and having parents involved in the education of their children. And so parents and law enforcement officers, those who like truth in sentencing, people supporting the right to work law, people liking a more affordable electricity. The cost of living was a big issue. Reducing taxes, particularly on taxes on groceries, was a literal kitchen table issue. And so there's just a lot of things that parents, taxpayers, small business owners, those who respect law enforcement have to cheer about. And Glenn Youngkin's got to work right away. And one of the first things he did is he wiped out the entire parole board, fired them all. The parole still is available to those who were convicted prior to 1995, when we abolished parole and put in truth in sentencing. And I had two victims on the parole board, and Governor Youngkin has put a victim on, as well as a former prosecutor and judge onto it. So they're gonna get the parole board in order. The other thing he's doing, and this affects some of y'all affects y'all in Maryland, is Virginia with this woke Green New Deal nonsense that took over Virginia in the last 2 years. Virginia was a member of this regional greenhouse gas initiative. It's a cap and trade energy tax scheme that adds several dollars right now every month to our electricity bills every month, and it's going to only get worse. And there's no reason for Virginians to be paying unnecessarily higher power bills every month. And the states to the Northeast have all joined in it, and other than Pennsylvania, that is energy literate. But these states are all losing population, losing economic development, and so Glenn Youngkin has a directive to get us extricated from that regional greenhouse gas initiative. He also wants to make sure that our schools are teaching how to read and write and speak the English language, and higher levels of math and science and economics, and all the history of our country, not just from a racial point of view. And I just think there's just so many good things coming in Virginia. He used the term I always use, and Bob, you'd hear me say it too, is Virginia is open for business.
Yeah.
And that's just a great attitude to lower taxes, make permitting more prompt, and also reduce unnecessarily burdensome regulation. So, and the other thing is all these the schools, the public schools in Virginia, were at one point they're talking about having vaccine mandates for the kids, and they have a mask mandate. Some of the school boards didn't want to make the kids wear masks, and so he's gotten rid of that mask mandate. for schools. And as you would guess, in Northern Virginia, where the local government commissars like to control everyone, they're whining about this. But I think that Virginians will get accustomed to having freedom again in their lives and running it themselves with personal responsibility rather than having a governor telling them how to live their lives. So it's a great day in Virginia. And instead of going over the cliff, we're going to be ascending again.
Well, I can't top that. We're jealous, particularly with regard to the legislature, Gov, because with Republicans back in control, this governor is now empowered. Mm-hmm. Where in Maryland, as you know, we have a very, very hard left legislature. It is what it is. And it's very difficult for any Republican governor to get things done. Sometimes you can kill some things. But the legislature makes a great deal of difference. Governor Allen just gave a wonderfully optimistic and accurate account of what occurred, what's occurring in Virginia from 30,000 feet. And we can just sit back and admire it. The first day was outstanding. The new attorney general, new lieutenant governor, outstanding. But let me just make one observation that's probably as much a reminder and lesson for Republicans as anything. I have read about this, and Gov, we've talked about this, and I believe we talked about this on the show after the election, but the fact of it is, we can, in blue-leaning states, and Virginia, unfortunately, is a blue-leaning state. We know Maryland's a hard blue state. We need to understand that we can maximize our base, but that's not enough. What put Virginia over was an issue, a very tangible issue. And what it did was, with regard to very hard blue subdivisions, make us lose better, right, Gov? Lose better in those very those Northern Virginia counties. The issue was education. The Republican position was one of traditional common sense. It was parents have a right with regard to their kids' education. Parents have a right to show up at school board meetings. Parents have a right not to be harassed. Parents have a right not to be subject to FBI investigations. Parents love their children. These are public schools, public classrooms, public dollars, and public parents. So what the new governor, Governor Youngkin, did was simply repeat not just the Republican point of view, but common sense. And enough blue-leaning moms and dads said, we're not Republicans, we're not maybe conservatives, maybe we don't like President Trump, but you know what? This time, here, now, we're voting Republican. And at the same time, Terry McAuliffe, Gov, made the mistake of actually articulating how progressives view local education. He actually said what they think. And that turned a lot of people off. So it certainly empowered our base. But my point here is, for us to win in tough states, and I'm a little bit of I have a resume here on that, winning and losing. There needs to be these issues. And sometimes it doesn't take a genius or some great white paper. Sometimes it's just, hey, well, as the Democrats and the progressives go off the cliff, we're for common sense. We're for parents. We're for parent input. We're for local education. We're for local autonomy. These issues, it's not a campaign slogan. It's not some philosophical thing. It's just common sense. In fact, it's what both parties understood to be the case until recently, until woke progressivism was taken over the Democratic Party. So, Gov, that's maybe a thought, your comment on that, but I think it's a good lesson for all of us.
Well, Governor Ehrlich, you're right on target. The Loudoun County school issue of having this person who sexually assaulted a young girl in the girls' locker room, that no one finds out about it, and then they transfer the kid to another school, not telling anyone, where he's alleged to have assaulted yet another girl. And the person who was in effect arrested for all of this was the outraged father of the girl. This ended up being a national issue. This was, it was on nationally as a scandal. And Jason Miyares, our next attorney, our new attorney general, is going to investigate what in the heck happened in Loudoun County. The Democrats had passed a law that said they weren't to report to the police these kind of infractions. What nonsense. And that outraged folks. And then in Alexandria, they got rid of school resource officers, which are otherwise known as police, in the schools. And that's just one of the most far left places in Virginia, the city of Alexandria. And the superintendent of schools, the principals, the teachers said, we need to have police officers back in our schools. There's too many fights. There's too much violence. It's out of control. And so the city council, those commissars, had to reverse themselves to get police officers back in their schools. And in fact, I was with Jason Miyares on an RV tour. We're in Southwest Virginia, Western Virginia, South Side. And I saw people, sheriffs and local prosecutors who were elected as Democrats, who said the Democratic Party had left them, and they endorsed Glenn Youngkin, Winsome Sears, and Jason Miyares. And so those are issues that matter. The win in Virginia, just so your viewers understand what a switch this is in 1 year. Last year, well, in 2020, Joe Biden won Virginia by 10%. Glenn Youngkin won this by 2%. We did get inspiration from Maryland. Believe me, when people said, oh, we can't win in Virginia, I said, well, how the heck do you think Republican somehow get, Bob Ehrlich and Governor Hogan won in Maryland, getting Democrat votes. And Republicans need to add and multiply, not divide and subtract. And Glenn Youngkin did very well with black voters. I got about 23%. He's got about that amount. He did very well with Latino voters. Asian voters in Northern Virginia looked at what the Democrats were doing with the Thomas Jefferson School, which is a technology school, just one of the best, if not the best in the country. And the Democrats said there weren't enough Latinos and African Americans going to that school. And so they put in these new requirements. Instead of a meritocracy, they were doing some social engineering. And Asians, that were about 60%, 70% of the students at that school, looked at this as discrimination against Asian students. And so there's a lot of things that can be learned from Virginia. And the other side, and you're right, Governor Ehrlich, when Governor McAuliffe said parents shouldn't be involved in what's being taught in schools and the education of their children, people just, what? And he continued, but that's the arrogance of the elitists who think they know better than we do. Now, where Glenn Youngkin won, he needed to do really well in Virginia Beach, where he once lived, went to high school, and he won Virginia Beach with 54% of the vote. He got 52% of the vote in Chesapeake. And then the other places that really was a big change were in the rural areas that turned out really big. Normally, the rural areas in governor's races don't turn out as much as they do in Northern Virginia. And he did better even than Trump did. President Trump did great in these rural areas, but Youngkin did even better, and that helped offset that vote in Northern Virginia. The folks in Southwest Virginia voted really strong for Youngkin because I think they saw in Tennessee that was an open state that never shut down businesses. They used to have to play their high school games that the Virginians did in Tennessee so people could watch the kids play because Virginia didn't allow people in the stands. They all saw there's a better way of governing through this pandemic. And I think that's the reason why Southwest Virginia went so strongly for Youngkin as a reflection of a more free and more open and more balanced leadership rather than what they'd been seeing out of Governor Northam's halting governance.
Yeah, you better believe that this uptick in Hispanic support we see nationally during the Trump era is about a lot of things, but it's also about the border. It's especially about the border because you see these races in Texas as well, Gov. One observation, The other observation I have here is that, like Norton, many of these purple seat Democrats in the House, obviously they're in the House, so they're up for election this time. They ran as moderates, and Gov, correct me if I'm wrong, but so did Norton.
Yeah.
They've now governed as progressives. They've sold themselves as moderates. No, they're not liberal. They haven't even governed as liberals. They've governed as progressives. And you got to believe in this midterm election, that is going to be a determining feature in many marginal seat races, close seat races, Trump district that now have presently Democrats in control, at least the sitting House members are Democrat. So again, just a couple lessons. The progressives bet, it appears that Hispanics would continue to support Democrats despite absolute chaos on the southern border, which I think is a wrong bet by them, and we can see now the results. And my second observation again is beware of Democrats who campaign as moderates.
Well, I agree. Now, one other thing that I always do, Governor Ehrlich, is I refuse to call them progressives because their policies are regressive, and the people hurt worse by having to pay $20 more every time you fill up with gasoline, or you have to pay another $25 a month on your power bill, or you're paying higher prices for food, are lower middle income working families.
I love Gov's point. Gov, I love your point. I do use progressives for another entirely different point. I like
You're freezing up.
Yeah, I think we lost you there.
We lost Governor Ehrlich for a second. Okay? I'll go ahead and just end with a question for Governor Allen. We talked a lot about, or Governor Ehrlich talked a lot about lessons.
And obviously those views have nothing to do with today's woke movement on the left. So I use it just to point out, and now you see free speech liberals just scared to death of the woke Twitter mobs. So I use it just to further delineate how far left the Democratic Party has come these days.
Yep, understood. Every time I use the term, I just get into switch to regressive. That's my instinct.
I'll go ahead and throw out a question for both of the governors just to kind of follow up. We've talked a lot about lessons learned from this past election, but based on the school boards in Northern Virginia's reaction to some of Youngkin's executive orders, has that lesson really been learned? By the Democrat Party? And,
the answer is no. The answer is no, and to our benefit, if the mainstream, because I refuse to believe that most of the Democratic Party, the majority of the Democratic Party, has gone this far left. As I said, I think a lot of traditional liberals are they're scared. They're scared of being primaried by progressives. They're scared of being called names. So I just think that lessons learned, every party always talks about lessons learned, but for the most part, what I see from the left, Gov Allen, is Democrats deciding to double down. They almost lost in New Jersey when we had literally not penny one to spend in that race. It was a 50-50 race. You saw what's happened in Virginia. We've talked about that here. And you talk about these other referendum races around the country where defund the police candidates lost. And it was a bad day. This pre-primary day a few weeks ago was a bad day for progressives. And what have we seen? What messaging have we seen from the president and from the congressional leadership? It's been doubling down on woke, doubling down on progressivism, doubling down on this agenda, that doubling down, trying to get rid of the filibuster, Gov.
Yeah, you see that up there. Here's the one place I think they have learned. I agree with what you're saying, Governor Ehrlich, and so many, as far as the Green New Deal nonsense and all of that. That's their religion, and anybody who doesn't agree with them is a heretic or a heathen on it. The one place where I think the Democrats have realized they've gone too far is the defunding the police.
Yes.
The fact that even the far left, out of touch, elitist Democrats in New York City nominated Eric Adams, I think, he's now Mayor Adams, who was a former police officer. And that referendum they had up in Minneapolis where they were looking to defund the police there too, and so forth, that what the people who were for that were the white, college-educated liberals. The people against it were African Americans who are more likely to be victims of crime. And so I think that the defunding the police nonsense, the mob rule, the allowing of arson and looting to go on, I think there's a backlash there, and they have figured that one out.
I agree with you, but there's not, and I agree with your larger point. There's no backlash with regard to other major issues. There's no backlash with regard to the border. There's no backlash with regard to voting rights.
The voting rights stuff that they're going on. I can't believe they suckered Coach Saban into being for this nonsense. He ought to stick to coaching football because I admire him as a football coach. But the stuff about them being against a voter ID, that you actually have to have an ID to vote, and they consider that somehow racist. Well, gosh, these same liberals are the ones that want to show vaccine cards to go into a restaurant in D.C. and San Francisco and some of these places. So they want to do this ballot harvesting type stuff, and they don't, and of course they have the media on their side, other than Fox News and Newsmax and the Wall Street Journal, which not many people pay to get the Wall Street Journal. It's hard to get the facts out. That's why this direct line is good, and folks in Maryland are trying to make sure that our friends and others are getting informed and educated about the issues.
Photo ID is an issue I've written about extensively.
Good.
It's been a no-brainer forever. It is a majority viewpoint, by the way, not just with regard to Republicans, where it's near 100%, but with Democrats. I think overall the number is 78% support. You can't do anything in this culture, in this society, in this country today without a photo identification. To call it racist is silly. It's just silly. I don't know any better term for it. And to fight on that hill, I just find it fascinating. Again, we're talking about not learning lessons. To fight on the photo ID hill when I have to go show my Maryland driver's license, and trust me, they know who I am at the local pharmacy. But I have to show my Maryland driver's license to get my summer medication for my allergy, where you can't do anything in this life today, anything in this country, let alone this world, without photo identification. And they want to fight on that hill? Good.
Well, speaking of that hill, that's a great segue to our next topic, which is talking about 1 year of President Biden since he's been inaugurated into office. A couple of weeks ago, he gave a speech down in Georgia where he basically compared anyone who's against his, massive federalization and government overreach into the way that states run elections. He compared them to segregationists and said that they're bringing us back to the era of Jim Crow. I don't know if either of the governors want to comment on that.
Well,
Sorry, go.
Well, it's so typical of and disappointing of President Biden, who ran again, and it's like Governor Ehrlich said, they run as moderates and then they govern as far left extreme people on socialistic ideas and regressive ideas and all the rest. And the reality is the laws that are getting proposed are in many cases making it easier for people to vote in person early and making it harder for people to cheat. And some of these laws that they're criticizing, the whole thing we saw last summer with Georgia and the woke, skittish, cartilaginous people in the Major League Baseball moving the All-Star game from Atlanta to Denver because of Georgia's laws. Georgia has a greater access to voting, I understand it, than they do in Delaware or the state of New York. So, no one wants to be bothered by the fact. It's just all imagery And there's no one trying to deny anyone who's a legal voter the right to vote once and vote properly and authenticated. So I think using that, I think that backfires on President Biden because it just doesn't, it's not borne out by the facts. And secondly, it is hardly persuasive to be trying to get folks in say the US Senate, oh, we need you to vote with us. And they're saying, well, yeah, you're Bull Connor, you're George Wallace, you're racist, you're Jefferson Davis, this, that, and the other. You use that kind of an approach, it's not going to persuade anybody to come over to your side. It's because it's just so egregiously wrong and insulting.
It's like they have one play in the playbook.
Yeah.
One play. It's the same play. Just fill in the blank on the issue. It's the same play. We could go on and on this. Delaware has photo ID. If President Biden was so bothered by it, I guess he really wasn't so bothered by it for the last 50 years. It's a strange hill to fight on. It's strange rhetoric. It goes again to the point that for the entirety of his public career, Joe Biden was a Northeastern liberal Democrat, not a progressive, not crazy left. Once in a while, he'd throw a vote to the middle. He had a safe seat. He was that guy. You weren't going to knock him off. It's a liberal state, a blue state. It's a liberal Democrat. Okay. And then suddenly this new person appears as president, repudiating, by the way, his own voting record time and time again. So beware liberals, beware moderates who campaign as they always have been, because they may not be that way in the future.
Yeah, there's very few of the moderate Democrats left. And you're right in that. And both parties have been drawn sometimes to the extremes, particularly in the nominating contest. And that's what they worry about. They worry about getting renominated in a primary battle. But, there's things I think could help in that regard. I think ranked choice voting could help. I think redistricting reform will help, so you don't have these hyper-partisan districts. You all know that in Maryland, where those districts that they put together. I know our friend in North Carolina is grinning. They kind of do it in North Carolina too. But if you get compact and contiguous districts and more the districts where the people are picking their representatives rather than the politicians choosing their voters, I think you can end up, not all the time, but I think you end up with more districts where ultimately the public servant has to care about what everyone in their district thinks rather than the narrow extremes of their own party.
I agree with that, but I'll just add a caveat. Both Gov Allen and I are football guys. And in my speeches, Gov, over the last year or two, I've taken to using our favorite football analogy, because when you were in public office, when I was in public office, for most of the history of the country, Republicans lean right, Democrats lean left, but the game was fought between the 20s. It was basically between the 20s. If one party really got out of whack, they got punished, boom, that was it. And now you have this serious progressive push, this very woke agenda that has not just pushed the Democratic Party left. In many respects, it is the Democratic Party today. They don't want to play between the 20s. They're playing in the red zone. And to the extent the American public is now understanding this, I think they're going to pay the price for it, because that's not where the American public wants both its major parties to play.
Well, hopefully so. Hopefully so. And I think all of the people need to be part of those making the decision, as opposed to the Democrats have had such a strong hold on getting African American or Black voters. But I think that as more and more voters, regardless of race or ethnicity, actually look at the candidates, what are they proposing, and how are those policies, or how does their agenda affect me and my family and our children's opportunity for a good education or safety in our communities or better job opportunities. When they look at that, again, on a very personal level, I think our ideas on education, which is so important, on public safety, which is another top responsibility of government, and opportunity. I look at a job as the best social program of all, as a job. And so who's providing better job opportunities for more people? And so when you look at the migration, and you notice at every census, the migration of people out of high tax, high cost, non-right to work states to lower tax, lower cost of living, more business friendly states. I mean, people are moving with their feet, and they're leaving places like New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Illinois, California, and they're going to Texas and Florida and Tennessee and Arizona and Nevada out west, that are lower tax states that are more friendly to business, and they're getting out of those other places. So, there are those who have that, at least economic literacy, and hopefully will remember it. And as more and more people understand that, I think that our common sense conservative ideas of trusting free people and free enterprise can get many more people than we have in the past to support our candidates, who then, when in office, have to keep their promises.
Well, and we also have to talk about getting back to our roots and common sense approach to public policy. Free speech. I mean, we are now the free speech party. In the 60s, the Democrats were the free speech party. It was the civil rights movement. It was the anti-war movement. It was the women's movement. It was protest and dissent on campus. It was all about Berkeley and the First Amendment. And today it's a 180. And again, we're not the Republican Party to the extent it can just stand for common sense and free speech rights, including on the campus, where we lost this fight many decades ago, Gov.
Yeah.
But even today on campus, you see the beginnings of not just conservative professors, the few there are, but now some liberal professors and alums of these schools speaking up, forming free speech organizations. You see a bunch of groups on the right, free speech groups, now becoming more active on campus. And this is all very positive, and we have a long way to go on campus. But you see all the polls, these schools are now producing kids who have these weird views on trigger warnings and safe zones and speech codes and just simply have lack appreciation for the First Amendment. They haven't been taught the history of the First Amendment. They haven't lived the First Amendment. They live speech codes. And now I see at least the beginnings of some liberals standing up on campus. Some professors are saying, well, this is not what the academy is about. This is not what the country is about. This is not what our culture is about. What are we teaching kids? And again, some of these weird concepts have now come to the forefront in public education or in the private sector, for that matter, began on campus. It began on campus. And the limitation on speech, the limitation on critical thinking, the limitation on opinion began on campus. And it's a real problem in our country. But again, there are some positive signs out there. To the extent Republican candidates can talk about these issues articulately, use common sense, as we discussed with local school boards, and defund the police. We're today truly the party of common sense. It's not conservative. It's not philosophical. It's just simply common sense. And sometimes common sense will put you over the 50% mark and you can win a race, a big race.
It will. By the way, I'm glad to hear that you think there's something positive happening on college campuses. But I look at the liberals in these colleges and universities as the most intolerant people. Unless you agree with them, you're a homophobe, you're a racist, you're anti-whatever. And it's, I just think that it's pretty hard to see. I'm glad to hear some optimism.
No, maybe
it's because I look at the University of Virginia and the incessant embarrassment of that governance and administration there, where they don't like the honor system anymore. That's somehow racist. the appreciation of Thomas Jefferson, who is the author of the Statute of Religious Freedom, who wrote the Declaration of Independence, who founded that university. And he's looked upon negatively by many of the students, and some of them get it, I guess, at the University of Virginia. Some of them get it before they get to colleges and universities. That's why I think it's so important that in our primary and secondary schools, public schools, people are learning about what it means to be an American, the history of our country, major civilizations of the world, understand the free enterprise system. I was speaking at Liberty University, and they actually have a class on the Constitution and free enterprise. I thought, what a great class. Would they have such a class as that at the University of Virginia? Probably not. They'd, free enterprise. Oh my goodness, that would be too much. I'm sure they have it in the Commerce School, but it's the only history class they're going to have history requirement now at the University of Virginia is that each incoming student has to learn about the race history of the University of Virginia. Yeah, that's the history course they have to take.
I'll share one. Go ahead.
I just want to go. We obviously agree, and it's gotten way out of hand, and we've lost this culture fight over the years. We haven't even engaged in it. We just let them win, beginning in the 60s. But my point is, and I do monitor this issue quite a bit, because at Princeton, my school, there is the Madison Society. There are alums, and I'm always going out there saying, you know what? That check you write every year, the annual giving to your woke private school or your woke college, send it to a free speech group.
Good.
Just divert it. The schools are now beginning to hear this enough that you have, at least in some of the more even elite schools, competitive schools, you see folks, you see a movement. That's one thing. And now you really see outside that the academy, you see these free speech groups on the right proliferating, which is wonderful. So if a kid, for example, has a hard time with professors, discriminated against the professor, is ostracized for his conservative views, they're now reporting those professors. And Fox News and Newsmax and other right-wing outlets are publicizing that fact. And in many cases, the schools are backing down. We're beginning at least to fight back, is my point.
Yeah, well, I'm, as you know, with the Young America's Foundation,
Yes.
Presidential scholar, we try to bolster that, the freedom of individuals to think the way they want to think. And what you end up having to do is sometimes in lawsuits, but also embarrass them into doing the right thing.
Yeah, and we know that sometimes these schools will say, okay, you can have a conservative speaker on campus, and you young Republicans or college Republicans, you pick up the security costs. And that's the game the schools have played. And now we've learned to say, okay, well, we'll call Fox News and we'll, why don't you go on national television tonight and defend that policy? And in many cases, they've backed down. So we're learning to fight. We're learning to compete.
I'll go ahead and throw out one positive anecdote here. I'm actually right now at Virginia's premier university, Virginia Tech. And for the first time in recent memory, Glenn Youngkin, the Republican candidate, won the on-campus precinct. So the students who voted a majority Republican. And, in the public discourse on campus, so many times I witnessed people, it almost seemed unanimous for McAuliffe. And then people would come up to me afterwards and said, I know I said I was voting for McAuliffe in that conversation, but I was just doing that so people wouldn't get mad at me. I'm going to vote for Youngkin. Because they knew, I was the one outward person that they knew was going Youngkin's way. But there's glimmers of hope, I guess, for our young people. But with that,
well, it's the old secret handshake deal. Gov Allen knows exactly what I'm talking about when public school teachers would come up to you in the grocery store, some public place, to give you the secret handshake and say, hey, I'm with you, but I can't say anything. I'll lose my job.
Yeah, but there's a silent majority, I think, are starting to form in some places. Maybe not at the Ivy League schools, but in the rest of America, at least.
I won't take that personally, but at Princeton, some things are happening, and it's about time.
I'll jump in really quick here too, and maybe try to get a little bit even more of an optimistic view on it. I mean, at Campbell, I don't think it's as bad as some of these other, like you said before, governors, private university. And I don't know what I can say even really more at this point that the two governors haven't already touched on here. I think I've kind of been sitting as a fly on the wall and just enjoying the conversation back and forth. But I mean, at Campbell, at least, you know, there's always your outliers. But I think what you touched on before, and even at NC State when I was there too, I kind of saw the same thing. Is I think the attitude sometimes of a lot of our younger folks, whether it's at graduate universities and undergraduate universities, is I think they just really kind of lack life perspective. And I think that they kind of have, you know, the ability there, and it's a good thing to kind of voice their opinion and talk about what they're, you know, they're passionate about and their worldviews on things. But I think we also have to kind of understand of who we're asking these questions to. I mean, if you're talking to somebody with 30 years of life experience that can maybe touch on things a little bit more than somebody like, you know, not to sound like a hypocrite, but even my age too, it's, you know, they don't have much that they can give to it other than maybe what they're hearing and what they're learning. And as somebody that was a first generation college student, you know, through everything up until this point is, you know, I was kind of surprised sometimes by it's a vocal minority of people that feel so strongly about things that they really know and never really experienced. So
Yeah.
I think it's maybe a mix of some things like that.
I think your point's well taken.
If the campuses will allow, obviously you have college Republicans or young Americans for freedom chapters and so forth, so you can get with people who share your views, because you're generally in a minority at government schools. At private schools, it's different, and private schools do have to completely rely on gifts, whereas public government schools get money from the government, from the taxpayers. And some of it is a reflection, I suppose, of the states that they're in. That, you know, for example, the University of Tennessee allows faculty and staff to carry firearms. The thought of that in Virginia would just be, it would just frighten them. I mean, they'd be shaking. And the other thing is the prevailing liberalness. And Ryan was talking about it. Oh, I had to say it's from McAuliffe because you had to be polite. And you end up with conservatives having to cower or be intimidated by that prevailing culture. So what you want to do is bolster the students, be rebels, you know, be bold, stand for what you believe in, get that kind of anti-establishment approach and attitude to things. And but you can't do it alone, because I know they end up getting ostracized, they're you know, vilified, and all the rest. And it's different at different universities, which end up being, I think, a reflection of their states. Whereas, you know, states like Tennessee and Texas and Oklahoma, Nebraska, those places have their point of view. And you get to these, and academia is the most liberal place that you're ever going to go into. I mean, gosh, the city of Charlottesville, which is dominated by the University of Virginia, Youngkin got 16%, 16%. I mean, that's even worse than Alexandria. I mean, Charlottesville's been a nuclear-free zone since the 1970s. I mean, Mondale beat, Reagan won in Massachusetts over Mondale, not Charlottesville. I mean, that's the University of Virginia. That's, you know, they have tenure and all of that, and it's something to fight. But you need to bolster and arm and support the young people, folks like Ryan and others that just say, look, well, we have your back, we'll support you. Well, you know, Ryan, we did that one show on Direct Line, I guess last year, with a bunch of college students from a variety of states. After that, I felt like I was a psychologist trying to keep those kids cheered up about how intimidating the prevailing culture is on their campuses. And it wasn't just Virginia students. They were from North Carolina, Maryland, South Carolina, and other places. So it's tough to be a conservative these days on college campuses. You have to have a strong backbone and a willingness to fight.
Yeah, I'll associate myself with those remarks every day. And I'll just add that I have one in college and one going to college, and engage, compete, be respectful, but never back down. Never back down. And as Gov just said, it's easy to preach. It's easy to give that guidance, that advice. Real tough when real world classroom, real world progressive teacher does his or her thing in the classroom, and the students are scared to death to speak otherwise. But to the extent we back down, we're part of the problem. And we did that show last year. And when I go on college campuses, I just assure our young kids that we're going to be there for you. We're going to support these groups. These groups are out there. We're going to, if we need to go to court, we'll go to court. But we need to have this culture war. We need to engage. This culture war was brought to us. We didn't start it. They started and they won because we wouldn't participate. We didn't show up. And now, late in the game, we're showing up. Don't forget, the price to be paid for not showing up all those years is numerous generations of college kids graduating into the private sector with the notion they get to go through life without having to confront other opinions. They get to go through life being comfortable. They get to go through life going to their safe zone if they're ever approached with anything, or be given a trigger warning so they can mull over something unpleasant in life. All these constructs, these academic constructs that have come about over the years are a function of what professors and administrators have come up with, and we haven't engaged. And now we're engaging. And we need to engage, and we need to truly arm, in a philosophical sense, in a substantive sense, our kids to compete, again, to engage respectfully, but not back down. Not back down, because to the extent we back down, we're part of the problem.
So with that, I think that was a great closing statement. I don't know, Governor Allen, if you have any final thoughts. We've got another minute or two left.
All right. Well, no, I agree with what Governor Ehrlich said. And my general view is you need to stand strong and positively for freedom and opportunities for all. You need to be bolstered with the facts and the evidence. It's something that a lot of us, even in this pandemic, where you had all these shutdowns, I think what the universities have done, and some of them having virtual learning is cheating with the tuition. I think what's been done, particularly in public schools, is going to be so damaging to young people who will not watch a video. I mean, their attention span of a sixth grader is about 30 seconds. And then I worry about that. So there's a lot of damage that's been done because of the governance in some states in this pandemic, and we need to bounce back. And I think Virginia's bouncing back, and I think if we again share our information, share the facts, share the evidence, and the aspirations that we have, common sense conservatives have, I think we can win. And it's not just us winning as a party; it's uplifting everyone in our country. So everyone who's put here on earth by God to do something well, that they reach their full potential in whatever they want to do and aspire to in life. So thank you to all of y'all for watching. It's always great to be with Governor Ehrlich and you and Ryan and Chris. Thanks for joining us from North Carolina. You're lowering taxes, so Virginia's got to keep competing with North Carolina. That's been beating Virginia for jobs. So we'll be more competitive with you. But most of all, everyone stay positive. And I think everyone should have a healthy, unmuzzled, and therefore happy new year ahead.
And I'll just conclude with saying how much fun I always have with you all on this show, with Gov Allen, who's been a friend for many, many, many decades. And also a unapologetic plug for the new book here.
It's a great book.
The new book is Original, Unconventional, and Inconvenient, Donald J. Trump and His Mega Movement. I'll just make this point. Oh, perfect, guys. I'll just make this point that a lot of the common sense policy positions we've talked about during this show were adopted by President Trump. Obviously, a lot of folks have issues one way or the other with his personality, with the MO. But the bottom line to the Trump years, the bottom line to this great disruptor was the fact that this is a sort of a new way for the Republican Party, a party that's going to grow, that's going to expand, as he showed us, could be done. And to the extent you're unafraid, to the extent you call out China, for example, to the extent you are the disruptor, to the extent you speak common sense when the woke mob would have it otherwise. These are all lessons I talk about in the book. And during the Trump era, again, a lot of lessons for us going forward. So again, my pleasure. Godspeed, everyone. Be safe. Congratulations to Virginia. And let's hope that's a precursor of things to come.
Thank you, everyone.